The most consistent duo this year.
It's obvious.
Best duo in the world right now.
I mean, placements speak for themselves.
They got second major 1, first major 2, first major 3.
And they won like a lot of duo cash cups, so.
Or the first season in general, they were dominating.
Now they're looking really strong.
I don't think anyone put them that crazy.
Like 100% the most dominating team of everyone.
I mean, there's no one else more consistent than us, I would say.
But just who is Peterbot? Peter Kata, also known as Peterbot, born June 20th, 2007, and 17 years later, he solidifies himself as the greatest Fortnite player of this era, and arguably of all time, by winning the FNCS Global Championship of 2024. But to really understand and appreciate Peterbot's historic run with his duo Pollo, we have to go back, but not as far back as you might think. You see, Peterbot's first real appearance was back in 2021 when he won his first Cash Cup, a Trios Cash Cup, in Chapter 2, Season 7, with his trio at the time, P-God and TK. And so, you see, unlike the likes of Booga, Clix, Epigwell, Mongrel, Mr. Savage, and even Benji Fishy, who first showed up in 2019 with their rise to greatness starting in the World Cup, Peterbot was too young to compete in 2019 for the World Cup. So his real success and rise to greatness in the Fortnite scene came later, when he and Pollo finally came together to make their historic run in 2023. But between 2021 and 2023, before he joined forces with Pollo, Peterbot still had to make a name for himself. And he did just that in 2021 by winning that Trios Cash Cup. After that, he started playing with the likes of Pump, Bucky, Macwood, and even winning a duo Cash Cup with Kanata in 2022. He then went on to duo with Byla and Quanti in FNCS, and even won his first FNCS with Byla back in 2022 in Chapter 3, Season 2 on the East servers. But after that, he struggled to win FNCS again, even after teaming up with Booga and even Byla one more time for FNCS Global Championship 2023. And so, after not winning for so long, a deep festering hunger grew inside Peterbot, and that's when in 2023, he found his greatest teammate yet, Pollo. But Pollo and Peterbot's first tournament wasn't as sweet or as nice as this one. In fact, their first time duoing was in a Cash Cup, back in Chapter 4, Season 4, where they got 11th. And so, when the next Cash Cup came around, Peterbot played with Rise instead, and they won. But when the next tournament came around, Peterbot chose to play with Pollo for Ninja's OG Skirmish Session 2, and they also won. So now Peterbot was left with a decision: play with Rise or play with Pollo. He chose Pollo. And in their first ever FNCS appearance together in Chapter 5 Season 1 Major 1, they got second, and so the taste of victory was so close again for Peterbot. But he would only ever be satisfied again when he held the title of FNCS champion for himself. But that second place was the catalyst to their historic run, because after that second place, they went on to win all the next 4 duo Cash Cups before the next FNCS Major, Major 2, in Chapter 5, Season 2. And in Major 2, the next FNCS tournament, Peterbot finally won FNCS again, finally claiming the FNCS title after 2 long years. This feat alone made Peterbot one of the greatest Fortnite players in history, as only a handful of pros have actually won FNCS, let alone win 2. But to win all 4 Cash Cups before Grand Finals was all but never before seen. They were the best team, proving it only further because when the next FNCS season rolled around, they won back to back. That's right, back to back. They won NA Major 2 and NA Major 3 after only getting second in NA Major 1 and winning all 4 Cash Cups between Major 1 and 2. They let all of North America know they were the best in this region. But this still wasn't enough for Peterbot. He wanted to be the greatest Fortnite player in the world, not just in North America. So with the second ever FNCS Global Championship on the horizon, and now 3 FNCS titles under his belt, he and Pollo knew exactly what they had to do. And they did just that, winning FNCS Global Championship of 2024, etching their name as the greatest duo and Fortnite players of all time. But winning this 4th FNCS title was no walk in the park, as this was Globals, and they were up against the whole Fortnite world, not just North America. And with over 100,000 people and upwards of 200,000 people watching online or in person at the Dickies Arena in Fort Worth, Texas, the pressure was on, not only for Peterbot, but for everyone else too. And so, after Major 1, 2, and 3, we were finally back at the FNCS Global Championship. And now, Peterbot and Pollo were ready to shock the world, but first, they needed to win. And that all starts day 1 with the first of 12 games to be played. But as game 1 moved along, it was clear Peterbot and Pollo weren't going to mop the floor with the competition. Instead, game 1 went to Teeny and Chap, leaving Peterbot and Pollo for 7th that game. But even with 7th place, they were 4th on the leaderboard, thanks to eliminations. So they headed into game 2 with a goal. Both of us make it to top 10 so we can clutch a win together as a duo. But as endgame came around for game 2, Pollo and Peterbot are forced to fight Acorn and Cold, and Acorn takes out Pollo. But Peterbot returns the favor, knocking Acorn and getting the finish, but not before Cold came around and finished off Peterbot, leaving game 2 in 15th place and dropping from 4th on the leaderboard to 6th, leaving the win wide open for Thomas HD and Queasy. And so, with the win slipping away, they went into game 3 with another agenda: don't be risky. And so game 3 began, and they did just that, making it all the way to top 10 and then top 5. Everything was primed up for their win. All they had to do was win a 2v1. But was this player better than Pollo and Peterbot? Or was the big stage finally showing its effects on these titans? Peterbot and Pollo choked the 2v1, getting 2nd place and losing the game to Swizzy and Yapko. But even after losing game 3, there was a bright side. Their consistency through game 1, 2, and 3 allowed them to be heading into 1st on the leaderboard going into halftime for day 1. During this halftime break, duos tend to go to coaches or re-strategize, and it seemed to be that's exactly what the majority of teams did, because when game 4 came around, the tides were different, as Pollo was knocked and finished before there were only 25 teams left and placement points were given out. And so, only a few moments later, when only a few placement points had given out, Peterbot falls as a solo in 18th, leaving an easy win for the likes of Vico and Blixie. But this game was by far their worst performance by Peterbot and Pollo for day 1. And so, that fluke of a bad game sent a reality check that would carry on the next and last 2 games of day 1. A reality check that would check all other players, because even after their worst game of the day, they were still 1st on the leaderboard by just 1 point. So, determined not to lose their 1st place lead they've held for the last 2 games, they went into game 5 to win and nothing else. So when endgame came around and there was only one other team, making it a 2v2, Peterbot and Pollo knew they couldn't do anything risky. So they played low ground and let all the kills come to them. And just when Pollo decides to head to height to frag out and cause mayhem, Bryce has the same thought. Bryce drops from height only to be met by Pollo going up, sealing this 2v2 into another 2v1 for the win. But could they win this 2v1 after losing one just games earlier? Of course, Peterbot wasn't going to let the nerves ruin anything this time. And now with 5 of the 6 games done for day 1, they all but guaranteed their win as they were 50 plus points ahead of 2nd, almost a full win ahead. So heading into game 6, Peterbot and Pollo had one agenda: running away with the whole competition on their backs right now. And everyone else's agenda? Don't let them run away with the win. But that is easier said than done, as no one dared to really contest Peterbot and Pollo off spawn. So having that reveal medallion and mythic gun for Peterbot and Pollo uncontested for 6 out of 6 games made it inevitable they would end up in another 2v2 scenario in the 6th game for the win. And of course it turns into a 1v1 versus Asia's and Pollo, and this time Pollo gets the clutch and win for his duo, and that's exactly what he does, winning game 6 of day 1 of the FNCS Global Championship, all but securing the win regardless of day 2 because they ran away with a whopping 145 plus point lead after game 6 of day 1, winning 2 games with a 2nd place finish and 45 eliminations, almost double the amount of eliminations of the next best team, Vico and Flixie, who had 27 eliminations. And out of Pollo and Peterbot's 45 eliminations, 30 came just from Peterbot. So after game 6 on day 1, Peterbot and Pollo all but buried the competition for good. But with day 2 comes a new day, new challenges, new passions, ambitions, and most importantly of all, a 1.5x point multiplier. So heading into Game 7, emotions were high and feelings were strong. And with all these new factors for Day 2, Game 7, not everyone was ready to just roll over and let Peterbot and Pollo win. And so, as Day 2, Game 7 begins, everyone was fighting harder. But no one still directly contested Peterbot and Pollo at the raft. Rather, they split it and let Pollo and Peterbot have the cream of the crop. But even with arguably the best loot in the game, when they rotated to Rift Island, their loadouts were in shambles. And so, they needed to press the issue. So they started fighting the other teams on Rift Island. But just as Pollo knocks Reason, Shalom fires down on Pollo, distracting him from Reason's duo Vidil, and Vidil takes advantage of this, taking out Pollo. But Peterbot wasn't going down without a fight, and he wasn't going to let his duo get fully eliminated if he could help it either. Throwing up the armored walls, the saving grace for players this season, giving Peterbot just enough time to res Pollo. But now, they were worse off than before, as Game 1 of Day 2 was not going their way, and so after a big shot from Vidil, Peterbot and Pollo had to make a decision. Stay and fight for Surge and loot, or run from Storm and get a refresh later. And that's exactly what they did. But as soon as they try to fight another team, Sphinx and Dukes, Peter goes down. But Pollo wasn't going to let it slide, as Peter just saved him. But he was unsuccessful, falling in the process, and leaving the Game 7 win all but open for second place Thomas HD and Queasy. And with that win, and Peterbot and Pollo getting no placement points for that game because they fell too early and only 6 elimination points, Peterbot and Pollo's 140 plus point lead dwindled down to a 23 point lead, giving hope to others, but no more than second places Thomas HD and Queasy's, some of EU's best. And so, with that loss, Pollo and Peterbot had to lock in. But at the same time, Thomas and Queasy gave hope to the rest of the lobby that this isn't over yet. So as Game 8 of 12 begins, the second game of Day 2 starts and tensions are high. And as Pollo and Peterbot fight Swizzy and Yapko, one of the few duos that lands on them at the raft, and the duo who 1v2'd them on Day 1 for the win, other teams interrupt their plans and it forces Peterbot and Pollo to leave quickly. But as they run away, they were quick to realize they wouldn't make it out of Storm with such low HP, so as Peterbot pops his medkit, Pollo falls, waiting to be revived. And just as they start the revive, Skrull and Sky show up, trying to put an end to Peterbot and Pollo's Game 8 run. But Peter wasn't going down so easily, and as he tries to armor him and Pollo in, like he did on Island, he accidentally pushes him outside the box. And so, with the revive on Pollo no longer possible, Peter sat, took a deep breath, and braced for the onslaught that Skrull and Sky were about to bring. But taking down the bot is never as easy as it seems. So Peter starts the exchange, and even getting out on height, giving Sky and Skrull a run for their money. And just as he's down to his last HP, he sees band-aids. But as he grabs them, another team shows up, ending their 8th game in 36th place before placement points go out. And so, with first place down, second places Thomas and Queasy were all but guaranteed first, as long as they could make it to placement points, as Day 2 had a 1.5x point multiplier. And so, as points came out, Peterbot and Pollo lose first place after holding it since Game 3 of Day 1. But luckily for Peterbot and Pollo, Thomas and Queasy couldn't clutch a back-to-back win and fall after only taking a 37-point lead on Pollo and Peterbot. And so, Cammy and Seti steal themselves a win on Game 8, and now, with Game 9 on its way, Pollo and Peterbot needed to at least make it to placement points. And they did just that, but with Thomas and Queasy still alive, first wasn't theirs just yet. But they were here at endgame, and all they needed to do now is outlive Thomas and Queasy. And just as Thomas falls, so does Pollo just moments later, leaving Queasy and Peterbot first and second place to solo clutch for as long as they can. For Peter, long enough to outlive Queasy and get points to take back first, and for Queasy to live longer than Peter and not let that happen. But as Queasy is just one shot, he falls to Peter, leaving first place open for Peterbot. But first, he has to gain 25 points. But Peterbot wasn't worried about 25 points. He wanted the win. And he did just that, taking down the rest of the lobby who all happened to be solos trying to clutch for their duos. But next to Peterbot, how could they? And so, Peterbot solo clutches Game 3 of Day 2. But with that win, there came another victory. They were first on the leaderboard again, heading into halftime on Day 2, just like Day 1. And after talking to their coach in halftime, Peter and Pollo were ready to lift that trophy and become the greatest Fortnite players of all time. And so Game 10 of 12 began after halftime, And still, with having the medallion and the mythic to themselves, their win was all but inevitable, but that didn't mean Thomas and Queasy weren't going to try. But as endgame came around, Thomas and Queasy weren't the only teams with their eyes on Peter and Pollo. Instead, this time it was Acorn and Cold, landing huge hits on Peter and Pollo, who were already low and in shambles. But they somehow managed to survive and get a tiny refresh later, while Thomas and Queasy had all the loot to win. And so, as the game continues, they were working with crumbs, and they fall in 17th place, getting only a handful of points for placement and elims. And so, behind by only 54 points, Thomas and Queasy knew they had to steal back first, but with all the heals, they still needed a refresh for mats. And in FNCS Globals, just like that, you can go down like Thomas, leaving Queasy to have to solo clutch again. But just as Queasy finds a refresh for heals and mats, he dies to Storm, leaving game 10 to Bryson Bolts. And so, with Thomas and Queasy falling just moments after Peterbot and Pollo and Peterbot still held first by 39 points. But with that 1.5x point multiplier, that was nothing. So from almost running away with the win on day 1 to this, the competition was neck and neck, which was unbelievable considering day 1. So heading into the second to last game, Peter, Pollo, Thomas, and Queasy knew it was all or nothing. And so they went on as they have, each with their own respectable loot paths that have been tested, tried, and proven to take these two duos back to endgame. And without fail, they each did just that. So when endgame came around for game 11, both duos were like lions or giants, stepping on the rest of the players like ants. But just as all was going perfect for these two duos, Pollo fell, leaving Peter to have to solo clutch yet again. But could he do it when second place, their number 1 antagonist to their historic run, was still alive and healthy with each Thomas and Queasy still up? Peter had a new agenda. Now that he lost his duo, collect as many points as he can under the point multiplier for day 2. But as Thomas and Queasy dominated from height and Peterbot fragged out as a solo on low ground, it was becoming more and more apparent that Peter would have to cross paths with Queasy and Thomas the more each of them kept eliminating players, making it poetic justice that Peterbot, the 2024 global champion and the greatest Fortnite player of all time, would have to 1v2 the only people able to stop him in second place, Thomas and Queasy. And so at the end of game 11, Peterbot takes out Thomas, leaving Queasy, who takes out Booga, leaving a 1v1 versus the bot and Queasy. And of course, the second to last game of the global championship, game 11, went to Peterbot and Pollo after another solo clutch win from Peterbot versus Thomas HD and Queasy. And so now, with one more game left, the win felt all but theirs. And so with that final game left, and only a 37-point lead on second due to Queasy getting second last game, it was far from one for Peterbot and Pollo, especially considering they didn't have a perfect run today and died early games 1 and 2 of day 2. And that's exactly what they would need to avoid, or their run would be all but over, with Thomas and Queasy lurking and performing an amazing day 2 comeback to challenge for the win. But even though they were the ones performing best on day 2, Thomas HD and Queasy somehow managed to fall first, securing the win for Peterbot and Pollo. But now with the win 100% theirs, they wanted to show off, and they did just that now that the burden and stress of winning was gone. And so they completely fragged out, eliminating the rest of the duos and adding a third win on day 2, winning the final game just to flex. And with that final elimination in game 12, Peterbot and Pollo officially became the FNCS Global Champions of 2024, lifting the trophy and winning $400,000 in earnings to split. And now that they won, they solidified themselves as the greatest of all time, winning 5 of the 12 games, almost 6 of the 12, but they had a second place finish. They also had 81 eliminations, almost double the next best duo, Vico and Flixie, who had 45 eliminations, proving without a doubt why Peterbot is the best, now with 4 FNCS titles under his belt, 3 of which came back to back to back. And so, will we ever see a duo like this again? What's the future hold for Pollo and Peterbot now that FNCS is trios? Only time will tell, but one thing is for certain. Peterbot, real name Peter Kata, officially became the greatest Fortnite player of all time, winning his 3rd FNCS in a row at Globals on September 8th, 2024. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and comment, and also consider subscribing to the channel if you want more Fortnite content.
We got second to first major, and then win, win, win. It's 3P.
We heard you earlier on the comms say, greatest in the world, baby. Is that what it feels like right now? You've proved it on this main stage.
Yeah, we are the greatest in the world. I will say that for sure.